Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Why does God allow evil in the world? How do you tell if an alien civilization is advanced? Are shadow people really evil? Hello and welcome to the 1009th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live, and on YouTube. I'm Ben, and that was Paul. And, well, that was me also. My dad is with us as well, remotely via Skype. And today we bring you an open line show to answer your questions and comments on many paranormal subjects. And on a warm welcome back note to our special guest co-host today, the one and only Shane Searway.
It's good to be back. It's been quite a while, and good to see you guys again.
Well, you've been a busy guy. I don't blame you. You've been all over the place, and we'll talk about that a little later. So I guess we can hop right into the questions now. Right there, Dad, old pal.
Okay, well, why don't we start? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All kinds of strange things going on here with the equipment. This is from our show reporter, Phil, in Atlanta, I should say Savannah, Georgia. Question 1, is it possible for a person to be a victim of an energy parasite and have no idea that he or she is being farmed? Well, I would say a definite yes to that. We've encountered that many times over the years. The farmers, as we literally call that species, will blend into the environment and not know, and be very, very inconspicuous. The people who often have these problems, anyone who's sensitive can pick up the presence of an attachment, but they themselves may not know. You fellas?
Oh, Shane, you want me to go first? Give you a little bit of time to get the old noggin going.
Sure, you can go.
Sure thing. So I guess it is. I suppose just from the work that we've done and the work that my dad's done over the years, it makes the most sense to me that just based on sort of the categories that my dad kind of established, it does make sense that someone can be farmed and not really know it. I mean, there's a lot of soul-crushing things that happen all the time in even the most mundane areas of life, and it's and your body doesn't really differentiate between stressors, right? So that stress is stress no matter what it is. The body reacts to stress the same way as you're buying a house now, or when we were Neanderthals or whatever, we're trying to outrun a saber-toothed tiger, and it's the same hormones doing the same things, and creating the same sort of I guess if we want to get into sort of pseudoscientific territory with vibrations perhaps or energies or something with which that these entities can sustain themselves off of. With that in mind, it's how one you can go through this and not even really realize it, right? Chronic fatigue and things like that. It's all side effects of this sort of environment that can be created. So I don't disbelieve that someone could go their whole life without knowing that they are being farmed, quote unquote, because perhaps we all might be being farmed in some way, shape, or form. We just don't know. All we have is some vague, I won't say hypotheticals. We have some vague evidence based on our experiences and what we've seen in the field. I think it on a large scale, it's possible. It's happened in the past, and I think it could happen now. What do you think, Shane?
Yeah, no, I agree with both you guys. But so what I've found is, these entities, they kind of operate in two ways. They're either going to put you in an emotional state of being. You're going to notice that being done a lot more. That's going to be your massive haunting. Where they're really going crazy. because they're trying to put you in a certain emotional state of being. And then you have the case where people are in a certain emotional state of being. They're harboring certain negative emotion where these entities will attach onto a person, and you may not notice it. They may not notice it for quite a while, and so the best way to avoid that is to always try to keep yourself in check and keep yourself in a good emotional state of being, full of light. And so if you are harboring negative emotions, for instance, then you are unified with that darkness, and it can devour. It will feed off you. So if you are full of light and you're not harboring negative emotions, they can't attach to you. You're now aligned and unified with the light. But by default, if you're not unified with the light, you are unified with the darkness inadvertently, even if you don't know it. And these things will and can, not always, but they can attach to you, and they can feed off of that. And that's how I found that works. And so the manipulation of emotions has everything to do with breaking that connection.
That's really interesting, and I kind of want to come back to that a little later, because that does jive with some really interesting stuff I've been studying over the last few years. But there's a second question from Phil that we can dive into that kind of goes along with what you were saying, Shane, which is, can a person be a life victim of an energy parasite? And I guess it's true. I guess if you do nothing about it, it's kind of like having a cold, or like having the flu, or really any sort of injury or illness. It's like, if you don't do anything about it, of course it's going to stick around. I think that's probably the kind of reductionist in approach, but I think that's probably the thing that makes the most sense. Is if you don't do anything about it, it's going to be around for a while. I guess we've run into people with attachments, quote unquote, where the entity could be pretending to be something that it isn't, and people are like, oh no, it's helping me do all these things, and it's like, well, is it helping you? Because it could, it might give you a grain of truth here or there, but like it's really kind of just, not really, I don't know, it just isn't really, like, there's something wrong, something off, and it could stick around with you for life. I don't think I've ever personally experienced it. I don't know about you, Dad. Have you?
Well, yes, actually, a number of times I've found that a parasite or group of them will stick with a person or a family for generations.
Oh, yeah.
I cited the case before when I was in San Diego. This is before your time, Ben, giving a talk. And it was a pretty big audience. And one woman kind of struck me. She was sitting in one of the back rows, and I kept being drawn to her. And later on, she came up to me after the talk and said, "You noticed, didn't you?" I said, "Yes, you have attachment." And we had a long conversation, and I kept in touch for a while, and it turned out that her family had attachments for generations. And I think corresponding with those attachments were psychic abilities. So I'm not saying that all psychic abilities have anything to do with parasites. I think, excuse me, psychic abilities are a human defense mechanism, survival mechanism. But in the case of this family, I think there might have been a connection. Her great-grandmother, her grandmother, all down the female line, were very, very psychic and mediumistic. And so we kind of worked there, but that's one of a number of examples of life victim or lifelong parasite activity, even going generation to generation.
What do you think, Shane?
I agree, and I've seen that with families too, where it goes from generation to generation. One other thing that you'll notice when that happens, when I've worked with multiple generations that has dealt with this, they all fall into kind of the same category. Each generation, I've worked with as many as three, have the same level of dysfunction in their life. They struggle with the same type of situations in their lives from one generation to the next. And is that accidental? I don't think so. I think it's these entities grooming. They start off with one generation, they groom the next one, and then they groom the next one. And it sounds like I'm talking about something else here that we deal with every day, like our schools. But anyway, so it goes. That's kind of what these things can do. That they don't always do that, but when you do look at these generations, you'll notice the same level of dysfunction or the same emotional issues and the same societal struggles or whatever with each of these. And that's not accidental. That's these entities grooming so they can move on to that next generation and get what they need. And it definitely happens. So that's why it's important to live a certain way. You have to maintain a certain a positive emotional state of being. That I'm telling you right now, that has everything to do with it. When you think of Jesus, and the best example he put forward was, think of him as a tuning fork. He showed us how to be in the right emotional frequency, like a tuning fork. And so when you look at how he lived, and you looked at how he never harbored negative emotions. He always gave positive emotions, and that's how you stay free from that darkness. When you are full of a positive emotional state of being, you're full of that light, these things cannot affect you. And that's just how it works. I can describe it in a more, like a scientific way and not use like a religious direction, and it gets the same results. And but yes.
There's a very interesting note on the bottom of Phil's email here. And Phil, as I said, is a show reporter who used to live in the middle of the Litchfield Triangle in Connecticut, and now has moved to Savannah, Georgia, and he's still chugging along as a reporter. He says, a report coming soon on reports of black-eyed children in this area. I'm hearing various things. Thankfully, I have not experienced them. Black-eyed children are a very weird phenomenon, which we're still looking into. They appear at your door. They have black eyes, like some people say certain aliens do, and they want to come in. And it's not a good idea to let them in, that sort of thing. And there have been other contacts. So we'll wait to hear from Phil on that, and we thank him for his work.
Indeed. Well, I guess we can shift gears. Well, sort of shift gears, because now we can kind of take some other listener questions as well. And we're gonna take one. I think this is actually maybe from YouTube, maybe not Facebook, or maybe it's from Facebook. We don't know. We'll find out. This is from Lowenthal88, who who has asked a few questions on the show before. Oh, I'm sorry, Dad. Do you want to say something?
No, that's YouTube.
That's what I thought. Well, it's from YouTube, so we have a fun little username rather than an actual name. And Lowenthal writes, just finishing your book, Dancing Past the Graveyard, on the whole matter of the multiverse, parallel realities, and such. You touch on the problem of evil. Teilhards or Teilhard de Chardin, words are all very nice, especially if you're not poor, hungry, sick, or abused. But with all this power, wonderful unity, and a loving God, why is there evil in the world? Parasites, remember them? It's to these multiversal troublemakers that we can look for why the original God shattered into gods. But didn't God make everything? That would include the parasites. Why would he make such things in the first place? In the end, it doesn't make sense, at least not to me. Thanks for all your research in this endlessly convoluted and at times quite maddening subject.
Well, that's very true, Lowenthal. there's a long quote in there from my last book, Dancing Past the Graveyard. But the theologian he's referring to is Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, one of the most prominent and one of the oddest theologians, Roman Catholic theologians of the last century, the mid-20th century, I should say. But if you've ever seen the movie Shoes of the Fisherman, a lot of people haven't. The priest in there, who's a friend of the soon-to-be Pope, is based on Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. But in any case, Lord all asked some very good questions here. The idea that God made everything individually, in a sense, is only one idea in theology. And certainly in Genesis, he creates the world in 7 days and 7 epochs, however you interpret it. But there's clear indications that he lets us go, maybe just to see what happens. Now, at the risk of getting into heretical ideas here, evil certainly exists, but there are various reasons for it. We, in the very book that Lowenthal cites, I have a kind of an idea that a lot of Christians might not like, that God is learning along with the rest of us, that his creation was, and this is very theologically sound, was an expression of his complete and infinite love. It had to express itself. So it exploded into this creation. And I'm saying, if the creation, if the love that caused the creation is infinite, why wouldn't creation be infinite? In the sense of every possible possibility, as quantum physics has discovered, all possible outcomes existing at the same time. And we only see in perfect balance. So that does not settle the question of whether God has created, quote unquote, evil, but evil has developed in a way that would test the ability of us to have free will. Now, not to get into deeper theology here, but there are reasons why that would exist. And they develop without maybe being directly created by God. Parasites, and someone else makes this point too, parasites, are they evil because they have to eat? Are mosquitoes evil because they carry disease? I mean, they can't help it. So, yeah, I guess you could blame God. But is the drama of life evil because it doesn't necessarily benefit us personally, or is it as a species? These are all questions that I think arise. And again, I think God may have set the whole thing free, and these things have developed, and we have a responsibility to respond to that. Shane, who always speaks brilliantly on this, talks about keeping things positive. What is positive? Positive is realizing the unity that God has created, and the positive nature of grace and all these things, regardless of your religious belief. What you believe makes no difference in the fact that we have got to keep things positive. Positive energy unites, negative energy divides. And that's what parasites feed on. We actually had a parasite in Indiana one time that apologized to the host for having to live that way. Now, whether that was sincere, I don't know. I don't think these things are human. But these are all points to consider. So, yeah, God made everything, but I think it's indirect in many cases. And it's the process by which we grow. I don't know if that's understandable. Ben or Shane?
I guess it's important to point out. I'm going to preface this because we got a YouTube comment a couple weeks ago that said that I tend to ramble a lot, so I apologize. I learned this thing very recently because my wife pointed this out to me, because as oftentimes my partner in crime points out my failings, and in this instance she made a really interesting point, because I really like Dostoevsky, and if anybody's ever read any of his novels, they're very long, and a lot of criticisms I've heard are, well, he tells a lot of unnecessary details, and he's like, well, before I tell you this story, I need to tell you this one. And let me just say, that is exactly how my mother is. And she will give you all these unnecessary details, but then she wraps up with a bow and is like, here you go, this is why this is important. And that is why I tend to talk the way I do, and I apologize if it comes off as rambling, and I'm not trying to cope. I believe it's just important to say some things before I make a point. And here's the point I'm about to make. I always find it interesting that Westerners blame God for a lot of things. You know, why bad thing if God exists? If God exists, why he keep bad thing? It's very interesting because it's pointed away from the self. It's not my fault, it's God's fault this is happening. You know, it's not, you know, the evil guy over there who's blowing things up. It's God's fault. God let this happen. And I, growing up, that was never a thing for me. You know, that was never like, oh, why did God do this? You know, it just wasn't a thing. It's not how I thought. It's not something that was in the subculture that we were in particularly. So I always find it really strange that I never really understood that whole argument, because it just never occurred to me, and B, like, it just, I don't know, it just wasn't really a thing for me. Because the problem is that everybody tends to, you know, clean the outside of the bowl rather than the inside, right? You know, the world's garbage, but, you know, I'm not the one doing it. You know, it's not my fault that I'm not contributing things and not out here trying to do my best to fix it or to try and be a better person. Nope, God's fault. All him. That's where it is, you know? It's not me, it's God. And not to say this about you, Lowenthal, this is just a general observation on my part. Because if you really think about it, in most major, you know, mythologies, it's usually you know, in pagan ones at least, you know, you always have the Deus Machina, you know, Deus Ex Machina, right? You know, the God comes down and saves everything. And in a lot of instances, that whole idea has stuck around, right? You know, humans mess everything up to the point that's like, all right, deity, come down and save us. You know, we've goofed up. You know, we're the ones who messed everything up. Come and save us. But really, at the end of the day, the whole point of Christ is to be like, no, this is like, I'm going to show you how to fix things. You know, this is how you do it. And that's the whole point. And if one themselves is not, you know, trying to focus on bettering themselves, you know, then the world around them is garbage, right? You know, there was a relatively recent holy man by the name of John of Kronstadt, who has this very famous quote that everybody, you know, that's what they'll point to, but there's the deeper spiritual meaning to it, which is, you know, acquire a spirit of peace, and 1,000 around you will be saved. And it's the same deal, right? It's along that same line of, you know, acquiring this peaceful, positive. I feel like positive is not a great word, but it's the only one I can think of off the top of my head that makes this happen. So why bad thing happen, right? Is kind of the other case, and it's like, well, because we're not doing anything about it. You know, it's like, you know, you keep driving your car into a wall, and you're like, oh God, why is this happening? And it's like, well, because you have your foot on the gas. Like, what do you expect? And it's the same deal. You know, these entities exist, you know, whether through whatever means, but it's like I pointed to a million times. You know, the book by Thomas Nagel, which is what is it like to be a bat, right? You know, I don't know what it's like to be God as much as I don't know what it's like to be Shane Searway or Paul Eno. I don't know what it's like to be them, you know? I don't know what it's like to be, you know, a microphone or you know, a bat. Therefore, I do not know what it is like to be a parasite, why they came to exist. There's many different ideas you can point to. You could say they're aliens. You could say that it's something, you know, they're demonic. You could say that they're ancient gods that are mad, lowercase g in that instance. You could say all sorts of things. And at the end of the day, it's kind of everybody's best guess. Because all we know is we don't know their essence, but we know how they act. And we know how they act in the world, and they act in a certain way. And they fit the mold for, you know, whether you want to call them demons or whatever. They tick certain boxes, and we know how they act in the world, and we know how they interact with other beings. In this instance, human beings, because we've seen them do it. And so, you know, by saying, well, you know, it's all God's fault, you know, bad thing exists. It's like, well, no, because we don't help it either, right? You know, people do all sorts of messed up stuff, and you know, they'll go around and encourage these things, you know, whether they're trying to make a TV show and they're just trying to antagonize something, or, you know, they just want to feel a little bit special because some cosmic entity is out there making them feel a little bit special and manipulating them. It's a story as old as time, and at the center of it, it's not God or these beings, it's us. It's us and our interactions with it. And it's us in the environments that we create by trying to control things. And in essence, we can't really control anything, but we have this illusion of it. And so we know that a parasite is a parasite, not by its essence, but by its energies. And that is my argument. What do you think,
I
Shane?
agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely agree with both of you, and I'll kind of take it a slightly different direction too. I think because the question was like, you know, why would God create evil? So here's a thought. So God wants to have an intimate relationship with us as individuals, and he wants to be close. So he wants us to be close to him. He wants us to have that intimate relationship, and he demands it. He wants that. So if we are not having that, if we don't pursue that, if we don't seek that intimate relationship with him, then we fall outside of that. And then would it be that maybe he put that evil in place so that it would drive you back to him? So if you're not going to be with me here, then you're gonna have to deal with some of these evil things, and you're gonna realize you don't like it that much, and hopefully you find your way back to me. And so I think that's kind of what our journey in life is we have to happen upon the realization that we should have an intimate relationship with God, and that's to the network. That's to be in his light, to stand in his light, and be unified with his light. Outside of that is darkness, and that darkness may have been put here to drive us back to God. I mean, it could be true. I mean, that's just a different thought.
Yeah, it's almost out of the Book of Jubilees, actually. But speaking of intimate relationships, we must take our break. So you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno here on WOON, AM and FM, here in Blackstone River Valley's kind of warm, sunny, and beautiful day here on the corner of Park Ave and Kennedy Street here in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, WOON, AM and FM. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with special guest co-host Shane Searway, and we'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Monique Charette Weekly, calling all classmates of Woonsocket High School class of 1978. Come help us celebrate our 45th reunion at Bella's Restaurant, Friday, September 15th from 5 to 10. Looking forward to sharing memories and making new ones. Please call Linda at 401-766-3134. Also our Facebook page at Woonsocket High School, class of 1978. Hope to see you there.
ON Radio.
You're listening to WOON AM and FM radio here in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the corner of Park Ave and Kennedy Street here in Blackstone River Valley's beautiful Woonsocket, Rhode Island. And with us, we have Shane Searway, here on Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I am Ben, and my dad, Paul, is over there. And we're going to hop right back into our open line show now that we've tackled some kind of hefty questions. And we're going to hop into another question. This one coming from Facebook, I believe, this time. This is Kieran in New Jersey. Your comments about how we define the term advanced really make me think. As you say, advancement should be spiritual and moral, not defined by technology, which would be very dangerous in the hands of spiritually and morally unadvanced. This is in reference to, I believe it was our prior, it might have been our show last week with Mark D'Antoni. Was it Mark D'Antoni we had last week? I believe it was.
I believe so.
Yes, and so he goes on to say, and the spiritual and moral would even feel the need for a kind of technology exhibited by UAPs. Would they feel the need for it? That is.
Well, Mark was 2 weeks ago. We had Earl Grey Anderson from MUFON last week. Just in case you're interested.
Sorry, we have Susan McNeil Spooler on the phone here. I'm just going to get her on the air and talk about a couple of things. We're going to put you on hold right now, and everybody gets to hear how the sausage is made.
Susan is the organizer of the many things, especially the Greater New England UFO Conference, which is back.
It is back, and we have Susan on the line with us.
Yes. Hi, everybody. How are you today?
How are we doing, Susan?
I am well, thank you. Just so you understand, this year the conference is going to be Sunday, November 19th in Leominster. I had booked this months ago for City Hall, and then they just contacted me earlier this week that, it's not available on the day you wanted it, even though I did the second day. And so I've had to move it to the Leominster Veterans Center, which is up the street at 100 West Street. It's going to be Sunday, November 19th from 8 to 6. Leominster City Hall is at 25 West Street, and then this facility is at 100 West Street, so it's not just on the same street, it's further up the way. We'll have plenty of inflatable aliens and signage, so you'll know where you're going. So having Nick Redfern is going to be coming up, and I tried to get in touch with him to get him to come on with me this afternoon, but I haven't heard back from him yet, but that's fine. He'll be talking about, of course, his Mothman and Real Men in Black, and he has some new experiences. He went down to Puerto Rico, and he was working with the Chupacabra, or was trying to go on a hunt for them in the woods, and he has some interesting information about that. We'll be having Dave McCullough from Massachusetts. He works with Jonathan Wilk. They go on expeditions in Massachusetts, Ohio, California, all different places around the country. So he always has an interesting and exciting information about Bigfoot. Our keynote speaker will be Jimmy Pentanito from Connecticut. He wrote the book called Phantom Messages, and he started his investigating the paranormal back 30 years ago with Ed and Lorraine Moore. So he always has a lot of fun things to say. Alexander Petikov will be joining us. He wrote the book, and so he has a movie, created the movie Lions of the East, as an addition to Sasquatch Out of the Shadows. And then finally we'll be having Matt Moniz. He has materials like parts of Betty Hill's dress, and he has soil from Rendlesham, and he has a lot of empirical data. I don't know if you know this, but Matt went to Harvard, so he's a trained chemist. So he has a lot of information to share with us. And then we will have a panel discussion at the end of the day, which will be very exciting. So I'll do the same thing. We'll have lots of surprises. We'll have a raffle. We'll have a food truck. All the general things that we have at our Greater New England UFO Bigfoot conference. So we hope everybody can come. And the price will be $40 to get in, which is reasonable. And we thank you so much for letting us talk about it. Any questions?
But I wish we could go. I wish my health was better. Well, thank you, Susan. That's great.
Thank you so much. It's good to talk to you again, and I'll come back on, as things get closer. And I always appreciate that you always support us with our wonderful conferences, and we'll miss you this year, of course, and we wish you the best of health.
Well, thank you so much.
We'll be talking to you soon, Susan.
All right. Okay, thanks a bunch, you guys. Talk to you soon.
Have a
Bye-bye
good
now.
one. Oh, wow, what a lineup, huh?
Oh, that's amazing. Nick Redfern wrote the foreword for the book Lowenthal was referring to. So that's a great lineup. I wish we could be there.
Truly.
This term, wow.
So yeah, anyway, back to the listener question, which was based on would spiritually and morally people even want UAP technology?
That's a good question. One finds that the spiritually adept through history have not seen the need for, the overabundance of material things at all. And so I think that's a good question. Shane?
I mean, what I've noticed at least in our place and time, it seems the more focus we put on technical advancement, the less we put focus on spiritual advancement. It's kind of like a distraction. It seems to be, anyways. I mean, look at our phones. People are always in their phones. They can't even connect eye to eye when they talk to people. They're always looking down in their phones. They're missing the world around them. And I think, so in a lot of cases, I think technical advancement is a bad thing. I mean, as far as like alien technology, we're not there yet. And I think I don't think we'll get there unless we focus more on our spiritual advancement. And I think right now in the state of this world, the focus of, just general people, seems to be what the focus is in this world. I think if we had that type of technology, I think it would destroy us. I mean, I think even AI. I think AI is going to be a horrific nightmare, but we'll see. And I think definitely, I think the person that stated this question probably feels the same way. I think we need to focus. We need to get back to spiritual advancement because we're far away from our ancestors where they were, and you can see in the effect it's having on this world. There's such an inversion going on in this world as far as our spiritual direction. It seems like every political fad, everything that's happening in the schools, everything that seems to be this fad, this direction we're going. And if you think about every single item, it's an inversion and it's an attack on God. And that's spiritual. And man, it drives me crazy. So that's my answer.
Yeah. Ed?
Oh, excuse me. I always like to look, because I think it's important that we look at mythology, because I am a firm believer that ancient peoples were much smarter than we are. And there was this idea that technology was a way to control the world around you. And control was always a really big part of, and it still is, it's a really big part of human existence is, how do we control the world around us? How do we fix the world, right? The idea of utopia. There's an author that I really like. His name's Paul Kingsnorth, and he does this little like blog Substack thing, and it's really interesting because he was a former environmental activist in the 90s, and he wrote this really fascinating. Actually, I heard an interview with him, and he talked about how the environmentalist movement changed from between the 90s and the 2000s, and he was really big into the British naturalist idea because he was he's from the UK. I forget which British naturalist it was who kind of was really into that, and he had this idea that we should really go back to farms and have kind of this agrarian lifestyle, and the problem is that we need to move away from the cities and back into nature. And that was kind of his whole idea, and that was kind of what pushed the environmental movement. It's like, okay, all this stuff's hurting the environment, all this technology is destroying things, we need to move away from it. And then somewhere along the line in the 2000s it changed, and it went from we need to get rid of technology to we need to use technology to fix the environment. We need to have more wind turbines, we need to have more solar panels, we need to have, fuel efficient cars, and we need to have all these things, and it's going to fix things. We promise it'll fix things. And what's it doing? Nothing. and he said, he's like, the people that I worked with, they ended up, they started like talking differently and acting differently. And he's like, and they just completely gave up what we believed in. And he was like, I couldn't be associated with it anymore because it was just so different, and it was all about controlling the environment rather than allowing it to be. And so he made that really interesting point, and I really thought about it because I was like, I never thought about that before. I was like, it's so true. And he made this other point that corporations started getting involved and a lot of money started getting thrown around, and he was like, and that wasn't the point. And so he made that really interesting point, and I really thought about it because the more we try to control things, the more we mess it up. And I'm sure we've all been in a state where we're all incredibly anxious and we're trying to do something. For me, it would be like doing a house project, and I get really stressed out. I'm like, I just want to get this done. I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z. I'm gonna make this done, and then I put a hole in the wall and everything breaks, and it's crap. It's because I got really stressed out and tried to fix it rather than kind of allowing it to be, or taking my time and kind of considering the situation and saying, okay, well, how can I work with the situation? And in this instance, with UAPs, right, this idea that, well, we need more technology, it's, are we mature enough to use it? And I'd argue we never have been, even back in the day. I pointed this out to one of our guests recently, that there was a dialogue between Plato and Socrates, and I reference this a lot because it's important. That Plato is going to Socrates. Oh, isn't it great? Thoth, the Egyptian god of writing, gave writing to the Egyptians, and now they can write things down. Isn't that great? And Socrates goes, no, it's not great. What are you talking about? It's horrible, because now they're not going to remember anything. They're using technology to replace that portion of themselves, because effectively what we're trying to do is extend ourselves through our technology and create, I pointed this out to somebody that really we are cyborgs already. I have augmented vision because I have glasses, and that's technology. I have headphones in right now so that I can hear both my father and Shane. That's technology. I have all sorts of fillings in my mouth because I have terrible teeth. That's technology. I'm a metal man. It is what it is. And so, I am kind of in the same mind that the more that one distances themselves from technology, less stressed you are, because you sort of allow things to be, because that's kind of that's the thing, right? We're not trying to control the world around us. We're not trying to control things. We're just sort of allowing things to be and to exist. And the more you try to kind of fit a square peg into a round hole, it's not really going to work. And so even if AI becomes a thing, it's like things accelerate so fast that eventually it'll just burn itself out, and things will just kind of crumble, and it is what it is. And what really matters is you stick to your principles and just kind of do the best you can with what you have, because really it all starts at the individual level. And in this instance, I'm getting far away from the question at this point. I apologize. But really, it's, even if we do, and some argue we already have adopted alien technology, it's safe to say that we're not mature enough for it. We're not mature enough now. We're not going to be mature enough tomorrow, and we probably won't be for a very long time. But yet here it is. And you do your best to be discerning with it, which is a word that's not often used nowadays. And you do the best with the tools that you have. And at the end of the day, that's what they are. They're tools. They're not anything more than that. And so if you use tools in a certain way, it's not going to be great. So you just use the tools you have and get rid of what you don't need. And so here we are. And that's my answer to the question.
Okay, well, why don't we take Terry from Oxford, Mass?
Ah, yes. Lovely Uxbridge, my next door town. So Terry writes to us. You have said that people bring critical elements of their own paranormal experiences, and that helps determine what they take away from the experience. What do people who are parasitic victims bring to the table, especially in possession cases? That's actually a really interesting question.
It is a good question. We often cite examples of where people go into a situation, whether it be outdoors or indoors or wherever, with a positive mind and in spiritual peace, aware of being in harmony and positive, as I said. And they have far fewer negative paranormal experiences, at least in my studies. And that includes me. I often cite that the 2016 Bigfoot encounter I had in Pennsylvania was very positive, very privileged, I felt. And a little girl from the neighborhood there ran into what seemed like the same or similar creature in broad daylight. It was utterly terrifying. So she had to talk to us about it. So I think the question of what people bring to possession experiences is right in line with that. The common perception of possession is that a demon will literally take over someone's body and personality. I've never found that to be the case. What I find is the disconcerting idea that people will sort of discover a common identity point in the multiverse with this parasite and will tacitly agree to let it come in. I found people who liked the attention they got because of it, felt a bond with the parasite, or demon, if you want to call it that. And I think that there is very much that people bring to it. Because you have to remember, there are many situations where possession does not take place because the person is in a better place than accepting it. So, either you fellows have a comment on that?
You first, Shane.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything Paul just said. That's spot on. And so, I mean, we have to remember that we are participants in that interaction. We give to that situation without us, interacting with these entities. They don't communicate. So, like, one of the most important things is to ignore them when they act up. But I'd like to use an example of. So there was a house that I was called to, and these people, they didn't feed into it. They didn't give this thing too much attention. They just said that we have like a helpful ghost in the house or whatever. But homes aren't really haunted. It's people. These things are there to interact with us. And like I said, we are participants. So they'd walk into a room, the light would turn on for them. They one day the lady of the house came home and she had locked the keys. She didn't have the keys with her, and the door was locked. And she was like, "Oh, shucks, whatever." And the door, she heard it unlock and it opened up for her. So they had a lot of that type of stuff going. It never struck fear in them. They never really had an interest in this stuff, and they were just the type of people just to blow it off, like, oh well, big deal. And they just let it happen, and they never, like I said, they didn't talk to it, they didn't antagonize, they didn't fight it. They just thought, hey, it's helpful anyway. So one day the lady's in the laundry room. It was like a laundry closet, and she's got the washer and dryer going. She can't really hear anything because all the racket. She turns around, her daughter's sitting in the doorway behind her, leaning up against the frame, and her knees were kind of bent up, and one of her legs was clearly broken, compound break. And she was kind of crying, but the mother never heard. And she says, well, what happened? What happened? She says, I fell out of a tree. And then the daughter later said that this nice lady carried her into the house, and now they lived in the end of a road. There was nobody around. There was no lady, but this nice lady carried her in. So that was kind of their experience in this house. Many, many years later, I got a call from these people, frantic, saying that their house was being torn apart. There was an entity in there attacking people, and it was just horrible. And I could hear the disruption in the background and the chaos. So I started driving out to this house immediately, and I'm like, wow, this looks really familiar. And I pull up to the driveway, and it's the nice house. Now, different family. So you had people that were a very loving family who didn't feed into it. They didn't give this thing any attention. They didn't try to, figure out what it was or who it was or whatever that was in their home. They just let it happen naturally, and they didn't interact with it so much. And so that was kind of their take on it in a way, but also because of their response, they never brought negative energy towards it, like anger or getting mad at it or anything. There was no fear either, which is a very important thing for parasites. That's where they want to take you, is to the fear frequency. So this house I pull up to now, what's changed? The family's changed. The family in there now is a mixed family. There's a lot of dysfunction, a lot of fighting, just a lot of negativity. And these things, when stuff was happening in the house, they would lash out, and the more they lashed out at this entity, the worse it got. And I've always said, like, if you're in an environment that there are environments that are because of natural things, components, so there will be homes, and not really the homes, but the area that will be more active than other areas. And most of those areas are going to have rivers or streams around them that are able to be more active. Now, we usually dictate what kind of activity is going to come through. Sometimes you're going to have activity come through no matter what, but we can dictate what kind of personality it has by the emotional environment we maintain inside our home and within ourselves. So you had a loving family at first, nice kind of haunting, dysfunctional family, and you have a horrific parasite just destroying this house. And so that is an example, and so I think a lot of it has to do with our perception and how we view things, but a lot of times it has to do with us emotionally, and because I can't say it enough, when I go in this direction with how I deal with people and how I help them, when I use the emotional frequency direction, it's what works every time. So I manipulate those frequencies, those emotional, their emotional state of being, and it breaks connection with the negative entity, like a two-way radio, two walkie-talkies that are on different bandwidths or frequencies that can't communicate, kind of thing.
All right, well, we're just about out of time. Ben, take us into the
Sure thing. Okie dokie. And we're going to start off with a couple of fascinating little announcements, because boy oh boy, it would not be Behind the Paranormal if we did not have lots of fun announcements. So if you're anywhere or in or around New England, you can take in the Exeter UFO Festival on Labor Day weekend. That's September 2nd and 3rd. The event benefits local children's charities. Sadly, we have had to bow out this year because of my dad's health, but please go and support the event if you can. info@exeterufo.com. Then the 2023 Western Connecticut UFO Conference, presented by the Danbury Library, will take place virtually and in person from October 22nd to the 29th. Events will begin on this show on October 22nd with a very special guest and live audience interaction. More information to come. And the Greater New England UFO Festival, UFO/Bigfoot Conference, I should say, is back, and we just had Susan Spooler on with us to talk a little bit about that. This will be a one-day event on November 19th. That's at the Veterans Memorial Center in Leominster, Massachusetts. You can find out more information on that as time comes along. And you can visit our show website, behindtheparanormal.com, where you can find nearly 1,200 hours of our regular shows and special broadcasts since 2008, and CBS Radio, Achieve Radio, and here on WOON, AM, and FM. Also, you can hear many of these broadcasts on the major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.
What do we have next week, Ben?
Well, next week, that's August 20th. Geez, we're powering through August. Soon it will be fall and the spooky season. But on August 20th, we will bring you paranormal researcher Joshua Cherez for a look at the Phantom Detectives.
So we leave you today with a rather pithy thought from Hans Holzer, probably the most famous ghost researcher of the 20th century, who said very little that I agree with. Quote, "The will to disbelieve is the strongest deterrent to wider horizons," unquote. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno, and that's our outro, so we'll see you next time.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Broadcasting live and local daily from the Navigant Credit Union broadcast studio at the corner of Park